Then came the Charney Report, maybe the most cited of the reports in the history of these expert bodies reporting to government. 1979, there was controversy going on over widely different estimates of how much the temperature would increase if you doubled the CO2 concentration from its pre-industrial level. And so President Carter's science advisor, who was a geophysicist, is a geophysicist, Frank Press, later president of the National Academy of Sciences, asked the Academy to study that question. Jewel Charney, then a professor at MIT, led that study, used two of the leading general circulation models of the time, Manabe's from Princeton and Hansen's from Goddard, and a number of simpler models to conclude that the temperature change from pre-industrial for a doubling of CO2 would be 3 degrees C plus or minus 1.5 degrees C. And many people here will recognize that that number didn't change very much over the succeeding decades. But significantly, the Charney Report also warned that the large heat capacity of the ocean means that the atmosphere takes decades to come to equilibrium with any given CO2 concentration. And the panel noted that that delay in experiencing the full impacts of what one has already added to the atmosphere may cause society to wait too long to act. Very interesting finding for 1979. Continuing, 78, got that one out of order. Drawing on work going back to 1962, Mercer built a case for warming-induced collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet, which, if completed, would entrain about 5 meters of sea level rise. And that was an issue, again, which folks in this room know has received continuing attention ever since. Contrarians coming back in between 80 and 84, Sherwood Idso disputed the mainstream consensus, among others doing that CO2-induced warming would be catastrophic, and he argued instead that the CO2 fertilization effect would lead to a lusher, greener Earth, and we should welcome CO2 increase. In 83, in the face of Reagan administration and some energy industry skepticism about the findings that were appearing from the scientific mainstream, the White House Office of Science and Technology, then OST, not OSTP, commissioned another National Academy of Sciences study. It found reason for concern, but not panic. But a more alarming report came out from the EPA at about the same time. It was looking at pretty much the same science as the National Academy group looked at, but it reached a more alarming conclusion. It said, substantial increases in global warming may occur sooner than most of us would like to believe, and they mentioned potentially catastrophic consequences. Another EPA report in the same year looked with alarm and quantitatively at sea level rise. In 85, analysis of air bubbles in the Vostok Antarctic ice core showed that CO2 and air temperature rose and fell in synchrony through ice ages and interglacials, and that implied that strong biological and or geochemical feedbacks were amplifying the small orbital perturbations that had been identified earlier as correlated with the ice ages. 85 and 86, the Ramanathan team concluded that non-CO2 greenhouse gases will bring on warming twice as fast as CO2 alone, and Dickinson and Cicerone, Ralph Cicerone, later the president of the National Academy of Sciences, found that the temperature increase above pre-industrial could, given bad feedbacks, reach 5 degrees C or more by 2050. 1988, famously, Jim Hansen testified before a Senate committee on a very hot summer day, backed by his NASA research group's analysis, that anthropogenic warming is now very likely evident, and that its projected continuation will lead to more frequent and or more powerful storms, floods, and heat waves. There was a rash of contrarian reaction to the media and public interest that followed Hansen's testimony. The arguments included that satellite data call the surface temperature measurements into question, that the Arctic is cooling rather than warming, that the computer models are flawed in ways that overstate delta T from a CO2 doubling, that even the modeled delta T's wouldn't do very much harm. Big swings in Earth's atmosphere have occurred for millennia for natural reasons. And finally, whatever warning has recently occurred was likely caused by changes in the sun's output. All of those arguments were subsequently discredited except for the second to last. It is true that big swings in Earth's atmosphere have occurred for millennia for natural reasons. That argument is not wrong. It's just irrelevant to a world of 7.3 billion people headed for 9 or 10, where we care a lot about the fate of those human beings as well as other organisms on the planet. In 1990, the first IPCC assessment, the IPCC had been created in 1988, concluded, quoted exactly here, the size of warming is broadly consistent with predictions of climate models, but it's also of the same magnitude as natural climate variability. This was a view that pushed back pretty hard on Hansen, who it was argued at the time was premature in his assertion that the signal of human influence was becoming evident. In 1991, however, a new National Academy of Sciences report found that despite the great uncertainties, greenhouse warming is a potential threat sufficient to justify action now. 1991 National Academy. In addition, interestingly, that Academy report, in its recommendations of what should be done, gave equal weight to both mitigation and adaptation. I think the first major official body report to do that, to say that adaptation is going to be essential because no matter what we do, we can't stop climate change in its tracks. In 1992, contributing to a post-1988 tradition that any high-profile report taking climate change seriously earns a major contrarian rebuttal, S. Fred Singer and Associates took on the 1990 IPCC report at book length. 1993 to 95, studies of glacial retreat and ice cores from mountain glaciers in the tropics established beyond all reasonable doubt that the warming observed in the late 20th century is real and without precedent in recent times. In 95, the second IPCC assessment concluded the balance of evidence, famous statement now, the balance of evidence suggests a discernible human influence on global climate. 2000, a new National Academy of Science study rejected the Spencer and Christie contrarian argument that satellite and balloon measurements are inconsistent with the thermometer record of surface warming. In 2001, the Academy was asked by President George W. Bush to review the IPCC's conclusions. I thought that was a little bit like asking a district court to review a Supreme Court decision, but the Academy could not refuse a request from the President of the United States. That report endorsed the IPCC's treatment of the science and stated flatly that greenhouse gases are accumulating in Earth's atmosphere as a result of human activities, causing surface air temperatures and subsurface ocean temperatures to rise. President Bush's reaction stimulated one of my favorite climate change cartoons of all time, which is shown there. He's reading the Academy report and wondering if we can appeal it to the Supreme Court. I would add that the celebrated contrarian Richard Lindzen signed the report without dissent. He was a member of that committee, but he slammed it in the Wall Street Journal the day after it was made public. 2001, also the third IPCC assessment concluded that there is new and stronger evidence that most of the warming observed over the last 50 years is attributable to human activities, and the report warned of highly damaging future impacts and possible severe surprises. 2005 and 6, multiple studies showed accelerating ice loss from Greenland and evidence of destabilization of the West Antarctic ice sheet. And in 2006, yet another National Academy study rejected the contrarian critiques of Michael Mann's hockey stick history of Northern Hemisphere temperature change over the past millennium, finding that recent temperatures are likely unprecedented in that period. 2007, the fourth IPCC assessment found that most of the observed increase in global average temperature since the mid-20th century is very likely due, that means more than 90% probability, to the observed increase in anthropogenic greenhouse gas concentrations, and it noted that serious impacts were by then evident, not just expected but evident. Their other findings included very likely continuing increases in extremely hot days, heat waves, and torrential rains, likely increases in the intensity of tropical cyclones, and a certainty of continuing decreases in the pH of the ocean because of the absorption of carbon dioxide and the creation of carbonic acid. 2007 and 8, evidence accumulates on the pace of ice loss from land ice sheets and the rate of sea level rise. And then we turn to 2009 to 2015, coincidentally overlapping with the tenure of the Obama administration.